China is known for its classic gimmick of the debt trap. The Chinese Communist Party is the largest government creditor all over the world. Almost all of Africa owes some sort of money to the Chinese government or banks. But back in Beijing, the problem is nothing short of ironic. Xi Jinping is stuck in a debt crisis of his own doing, and he can't seem to get out. Now, China is desperate for money. How the tables have turned. So what's going on with the biggest economy in the world? Let's unpack, shall we? In its 100 years, the CCP hasn't taken a project as seriously as the One Belt, One Road initiative. To keep fueling the project with money, the party even went ahead and included the completion of BRI in its official constitution. That tells us that the state would keep injecting money into this global project. For the most part, the trade initiative has created a dangerous dependency cycle for the developing world. A huge chunk of the world is on China's payroll, and that's some really bad news. But what we usually skip is how BRI is making China desperate for money. Yeah, that doesn't sound intuitive at all. How come the biggest creditor in the world is essentially going broke? And nope, the irony doesn't end here. China is playing every card in its sleeve to attract foreign direct investments, so much so that it's pitching for every development project, including Saudi Arabia's Neom city. Well, the world of finance hardly ever bears some convenience, so let's go back to the origin of the problem. China's debt problem took a bad shape in the wake of the 2008 economic crisis. Not exactly surprising, right? But here's the thing. The fact that China is still living through the aftershocks of the crisis speaks volumes. At the end of the day, everything just boils down to CCP's weird obsession with infrastructure investment. In the wake of the global economic crisis, the government pushed for a colossal stimulus package with the help of bank loans. This particular policy was somewhat necessary to bail out big firms from their inevitable doom. But then, the government didn't stop there. China has a huge incentive to keep up its pace of rapid industrialization. It made an active decision to modify the economy to suit its industrial processes. That meant investing in industrial complexes, interconnected roads, manufacturing units, and whatnot. For Beijing, infrastructure investment is more or less the backbone of a stable economy. What we can't really say is that the government simply can't afford to credit more debt to itself. After the peak fiasco of the 2008 crisis, China's debt problem was almost stabilized. For once in their tenure, the CCP acknowledged that fueling their economy through debt dependency might not be an ideal solution. Sure, you'll take over Japan in terms of the size of the economy, but at what cost? You just can't keep fueling the same firms over and over again, just in the name of infrastructure investment. But perhaps we're giving CCP way too much credit here. Their efforts to minimize debt dependency hit the fan due to the COVID outbreak. Yep, this pandemic is the biggest tragedy of the faltering Chinese economy, and it won't end anytime soon. As the pandemic literally closed China's economy, the corporate sector almost lost its standing. And you know what happens next. The CCP pulls out some big bucks to save the firm, just before it could hit the debt ceiling. So now you have a heavily industrialized country making a very attractive stimulus package for the struggling development sector. This is where Xi Jinping makes a dangerous mistake. There's no doubt that Corona's outbreak almost deindustrialized the country to the point of complete destruction. We can't even imagine how horrifying the fall of the global supply chain could have been. It became obvious that the show must go on. In other words, China had to invest more in its dying corporate sector to save itself and the world. So, the CCP does something extraordinary here. It very clearly gave in to the demand of the corporate sector to make acquiring loans like reciting the alphabet. Super easy. In 2020, the country's debt was at a new time high. The records still remain unbeatable to this day. But that doesn't mean the record will maintain itself. Nope, try again. Because side by side, the government is also investing in massive infrastructure programs, and the problems are far from over. China's biggest crisis comes with a drop in residential construction in the country. Against the backdrop of the pandemic, investment in the housing sector has declined rapidly. Even with an extremely large population, no one seems interested in buying houses. And who would want to, especially in this economy? The drop in prices is an issue within itself. If you need anything to scare off the buyers, this is it. Nothing else to be done, right? Well, the CCP perhaps might want to address the mortgage boycott because it's clearly clogging the housing sector. Why is this such a pressing concern? Well, low investments in the housing sector are making China more debt-ridden than ever. If you dig deep enough, you'd find the real culprit of this problem. All fingers point to the China Evergrande Group, a massive property developer in the country. The company's cheap ways to make substandard houses and chronic delays in projects are single-handedly causing the mortgage crisis in the company. Now, you'd expect the CCP to solve this problem, right? And of course they did. And they did so by giving more loans to the housing sector of the country. That doesn't solve anything. At this point, China is making haphazard decisions to save its economy. Not to mention its restrictive zero-COVID policy is making things worse. How exactly do you expect people to invest in housing when they're quarantined in factories? As of now, millions of people are forced to leave their jobs to quarantine their apartment buildings. Industries aren't exactly working in their prime. So who's going to make use of the new roads in the industrial complex is a huge mystery. But here's the thing. The CCP won't stop its infrastructure spending. You could always argue to rather invest in fixing the healthcare system so you don't have to entrap people in their apartments. Yet, that's the most principled thing to do in times of crisis, something that Xi Jinping doesn't understand. Well, not at the moment at least. If anything, the state isn't exactly taking responsibility for its dying economy. It's so evident that China's economy is stuck in stringent governmental regulations and in the post-COVID world. But here's the thing. When your factories have to shut their doors because the labor supply is under an authoritative mandatory quarantine, are you really living in the post-COVID world? Not really. By all accounts, China is scaring away some very important opportunities for foreign direct investments, or FDIs. The CCP officials would tell you that their 3-year period of economic self-isolation is over. But facts don't lie. And facts show that supply chains are disrupted, optics are totally messed up, and logistical supply is extremely delayed. What we also can't ignore is that China's COVID situation is highly unpredictable and chaotic. Lockdowns pop up out of nowhere. And imagine how poor health management has to be to quarantine thousands of employees in an industrial complex. Here's looking at you, Foxconn. In times like these, FDIs are running very thin in the country. The political turmoil against the Chinese Communist Party is also gaining momentum, and some key investors are looking away from Beijing. There's no other way for the country to make up for the extravagant stimulus packages it has been rolling out since 2008. All things considered, China needs money. In fact, it is desperate for money. This is exactly showing the government is changing its approach by becoming more hands-on. Rather than waiting for investors to make their way to Beijing, the CCP officials are making the trip themselves. After all, this is a go big or go home situation for them. Xi Jinping is openly making investment pitches in front of the global elites. He wants some big bucks, and he wants them quick. China's real showdown came at Davos 2023 when the CCP advocated for its open doors to the World Economic Forum, and the message wasn't subtle at all. In fact, for the most part, it sounded like an appeal. If you have to mention strengthening international cooperation 11 times to bag a single meeting with Saudi Arabia, you know it's a problem. Even then, China's accelerated manufacturing plants are important for the developed world. So, the country isn't exactly a lost cause, not yet at least. The problem remains unchanged though. Money is running out and the returns are low. How the CCP deals with this challenge might decide its future. Because when people are forcefully quarantined and there's a demand for democracy on the street, these are some terrible times for Xi. Find this video insightful? Well, give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.